Mama Ebony had spent most of her life in the quiet embrace of her small African village, where the sun painted golden strokes over endless fields, and the rhythm of life was simple but fulfilling. She had raised her only son, Kofi, with hands that had known both hardship and love, teaching him the values of humility, respect, and perseverance. Years ago, Kofi had left the village with nothing but dreams in his heart and determination in his eyes. Through hard work and relentless ambition, he had become a successful businessman in the city. Though he sent money home, his visits grew fewer, swallowed by the demands of his new life. But now, after so many years, he had finally sent word, "Mama, come and stay with me. I want you to see my world." The news filled Mama Ebony with a joy she hadn't felt in years. She packed her modest belongings, her favorite wrapper, a beaded necklace passed down from her mother, and the dried herbs she always carried for good health. The village gathered to bid her farewell, their warm wishes following her as she boarded the bus to the city. When she arrived, her breath caught in her throat. Kofi's house was enormous, tall gates, polished floors, and gleaming windows that reflected a world she had never known. But it wasn't the wealth that made her heart swell, it was the thought that her son had built all this with his own hands. Then, she met Nadia. From the first moment, something felt wrong. Nadia's smile was thin, forced, and her eyes held no warmth. Unlike the welcoming arms Mama Ebony had expected, there was only cold politeness, as if she were an outsider in her own son's home. Mama Ebony tried to ignore the unease creeping into her heart. Surely, she was overthinking. But as she stepped inside, clutching her small bag, she couldn't shake the feeling that her presence was unwelcome. She had come to visit her son, but something told her this visit would not be the joyful reunion she had imagined. From the moment she stepped into the grand mansion, Mama Ebony felt like a stranger in her own son's home. The house was a marvel, high ceilings, shimmering chandeliers, and furniture too elegant to touch. But despite the luxury, there was no warmth, no feeling of family. Mama Ebony did her best to adjust. She woke up early, as she always had in the village, eager to prepare a meal for her son. But when she entered the gleaming kitchen, she was met with a cold stare. "Mama, you don't have to cook," Nadia said, her tone sharp. "We have a chef for that." "I only wanted to make Kofi his favorite yam porridge," Mama Ebony replied softly. Nadia let out a sigh, shaking her head. "We don't eat that here. Kofi has moved on from village food." Mama Ebony's heart sank, but she nodded, stepping away from the kitchen. She reminded herself that change was natural, perhaps Kofi had simply grown used to a different way of living. But it wasn't just the food. Everything she did seemed to irritate Nadia. If she sat in the grand living room, Nadia would comment on the way she placed the cushions. If she tried to sweep, she was told the maids would handle it. Slowly, Mama Ebony began to feel like she didn't belong. What hurt the most was Kofi's blindness to it all. Whenever he was home, Nadia wore a sweet smile, acting as the perfect wife. She served Mama Ebony tea, asked about the village, and pretended to care. But the moment Kofi left for work, the warmth vanished. One evening, as Mama Ebony walked toward one of the beautifully decorated rooms, Nadia's voice stopped her in her tracks. "Mama, you shouldn't go in there," she said, stepping in front of the doorway. Mama Ebony frowned. "Why, my daughter?" Nadia folded her arms. "This is our private space. There are certain parts of the house that are not meant for visitors." Visitors. The word stung like a slap. Mama Ebony swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Of course, my child. I understand." But deep inside, she felt it, she wasn't welcome here. Not truly. She had come to visit her son, yet she felt like a guest, a stranger in the house that should have been home. Days turned into weeks, and Mama Ebony's discomfort in her son's home deepened. Every moment she spent there felt like walking on thorns. Nadia never missed an opportunity to make her feel small. One afternoon, as Mama Ebony sat in the courtyard, enjoying the warmth of the sun, Nadia walked by with a group of her friends. Their expensive perfumes filled the air, their laughter like chimes in the wind. "Oh, Nadia, Who is this? One of them asked, eyeing Mama Abney's simple village wrapper and headscarf with amusement. Nadia smirked. Oh, just my mother-in-law, she said. Then, with a cruel chuckle, she added, she's still adjusting to life outside the village. The women giggled, whispering among themselves. Mama Abney lowered her gaze, pretending she hadn't heard. But the words cut deep. The next morning, as she walked toward the dining table, her stomach empty from the night before, she noticed something unusual. The usual breakfast spread, golden pancakes, fresh fruits, and steaming cups of tea, was there, but there was only one chair missing. Hers. She hesitated. Where should I sit? She asked gently. Nadia, sitting beside Kofi, didn't even look up. Mama, I think it's best if you eat in your room from now on, she said casually, taking a sip of her coffee. You prefer your village food, don't you? We don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Kofi, engrossed in his phone, barely reacted. Mama Abney's heart clenched. She glanced at her son, hoping he would say something, but he remained silent. Swallowing the lump in her throat, she nodded. Of course, my child. She turned and walked back to her room, the aroma of food taunting her hunger. That night, as she sat on the small bed, staring at the ceiling, she wondered how everything had changed so much. She had raised Kofi with love, with patience, with prayers. And now, she was nothing more than an outsider in his life. Then came the final blow. One evening, after Kofi left for a business trip, Nadia stood in Mama Abney's doorway, arms crossed. I think it's time for you to go back to the village, she said coldly. Mama Abney blinked. But Kofi. My husband is too busy to deal with this. I will arrange for a driver to take you back first thing in the morning, Nadia interrupted, her voice sharp. For a long moment, Mama Abney just stared at her, her heart breaking into pieces. After everything, this was how it ended. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had come with love, with pride in her son, but now, she was being sent away like a burden. Taking a deep breath, she stood. If that is what you wish, my child, she said softly. And just like that, the mother who had once given everything was cast out of the home that should have been her refuge. The night was eerily quiet, but Kofi couldn't sleep. Something felt off. He had returned home earlier than planned, hoping to surprise his mother, but the house was too still. Usually, he'd hear her soft humming from the guest room or the gentle rustling of her hands as she tidied up things she wasn't supposed to. Instead, the silence gnawed at him. Walking through the dimly lit hallway, he noticed the door to his mother's room was slightly open. He peered inside and froze. Mama Abney sat on the edge of her bed, her shoulders trembling, her hands clutching the faded wrapper she always wore. Tears streamed down her weathered face as she gazed at the small bag beside her, the only belonging she had brought with her. His heart clenched. Mama? She quickly wiped her tears and forced a weak smile. Ah, my son. You're home early. Kofi stepped inside, his chest tightening. Why are you crying? What's going on? She hesitated, shaking her head. It's nothing, my child. I am just. Her voice broke. Kofi knelt before her, gently taking her hands. Tell me the truth, Mama. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Nadia's sharp voice interrupted them. Oh, you're back, she said, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. Her expression was anything but welcoming. Kofi turned to face her, his eyes darkening. Yes, I'm back. And I want to know why my mother is crying. Nadia scoffed, stepping forward. Kofi, don't let her fool you. She's just being dramatic. She was going to leave anyway. Mama Abney stiffened, looking away. Kofi frowned. Leave? What do you mean leave? Nadia sighed as if she was tired of the conversation. I told her to go back to the village. She doesn't belong here. You have a life, a business, and a wife, you don't need a village woman clinging to you. A cold silence filled the room. Kofi's hands curled into fists. You told my mother to leave? In my own house? His voice was dangerously low. Nadia rolled her eyes. Kofi, don't be so dramatic. You know how these village women are, always wanting attention, always interfering. I didn't marry you to become a servant to your mother. Something inside Kofi snapped. You think my mother is a burden, he said, his voice shaking with rage. The woman who raised me, who sacrificed everything for me, who prayed for me when I had nothing. Nadia faltered. You think you can humiliate her, starve her, treat her like she's less than you, and I won't find out? Mama Ebony gasped softly. Kofi, please. But Kofi wasn't done. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. All these years, I thought you loved me. But now I see the truth. You never wanted my mother here because you were afraid. Afraid that I would see the woman who truly matters in my life. Afraid that her presence would remind me of where I come from. Nadia's lips quivered, but she didn't deny it. Kofi took a step closer, his voice firm. I would rather lose every penny I have than lose the woman who gave me life. Nadia's eyes widened. Kofi, wait. But he didn't wait. He turned to Mama Ebony and gently took her hands. Mama, you are not going anywhere. This is your home. And if anyone should leave, it's the person who disrespected you. Nadia gasped. You can't be serious. But one look at Kofi's face told her he was. For the first time in years, Kofi saw his mother smile, a soft, tearful smile of relief. And in that moment, he knew he had made the right decision. Tears shimmered in Mama Ebony's eyes as she looked at her son. She had spent years praying for him, hoping that no matter how far he went, he would never forget where he came from. And now, standing before her, defending her, she saw the boy she had raised, the one who had once clung to her hand as they walked barefoot through the village, dreaming of a better future. Kofi knelt before her and took her hands in his voice thick with emotion. Mama, I'm so sorry. I should have seen it sooner. You gave me everything, and I allowed someone else to make you feel unwanted in my home. Mama Ebony cupped his face gently. My son, I did not raise you to be perfect. I raised you to have a good heart. And today, you have proven that you do. Kofi turned to Nadia, his expression unreadable. You wanted my mother gone, but now I see who truly does not belong here. Nadia's face paled. Kofi, please, He shook his head. You had a choice, to be kind, to embrace my mother as your own. Instead, you chose cruelty. Wealth means nothing if you cannot respect the people who helped build you. Nadia lowered her head, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. She had won the battle for his attention, but in doing so, she had lost his love. Kofi turned back to Mama Ebony and smiled. From today, you will never feel like a stranger in my home again. The next morning, the household was different. The air felt lighter, as if a storm had passed, leaving a fresh breeze in its wake. Kofi sat beside his mother as they ate breakfast together, sharing stories like they used to. The warmth in her eyes filled the house more than any luxury ever could. As the sun cast its golden glow over the city, Mama Ebony whispered a silent prayer. No matter how far her son had traveled, no matter how much he had gained, he had not truly lost himself. And in that, she found peace. Final message: a mother's love is priceless, and those who forget their roots will one day search for them in regret.